very much, David, for your, again, kind welcome and long-standing partnership that we have between the Metro Hartford Alliance and the New England Council. We value, and it only seems to get better and better. We're sorry to have missed the event with Congressman Larson a few weeks ago. Beth Barton said it's probably one of her better events that she's attended, that I wasn't here. Nothing personal, but thank you for those kind feedback, Beth. But we are back, and the New England Council, needless to say, is back. And I just want to, again, echo David's remarks in the sense of thanking people. We're only as good as our members, and Dominion is a prominent member of the New England Council. It's represented by Kevin Hennessy, who serves on our board, and Dominion is a great corporate neighbor. We all know that. Any worthy cause, they're always there to step up and say, we're there to support. And I know that I speak for all of you, that we're grateful to have Dominion part of the New England region, and can't say enough about Kevin Hennessy. He's just an extraordinary individual and a great ambassador for his employer. Some exciting news for the New England Council. Just a few weeks ago, we announced that we launched, and we're very proud of our improved website, and we hope that you'll take a few minutes to check it out, newenglandcouncil.com. An awful lot of work went into it. We've gotten great feedback, and if you really, really like it, please let me know. If you have some criticism, let Larry know. Let Ashley know. We don't get criticism. We get good news. Again, the council is very proud to be able to say that we have resumed in-person events, and needless to say, we have been extremely busy, to say the least. But we have some other great events coming up in the next couple of weeks. Next week, we will be heading to D.C. for our annual 2022 Washington Leaders Conference that we sorely missed since 2019. But we're looking forward to two jam-packed days with some great speakers. We have Jonathan Martin from the New York Times, who has a bestseller book. This came out, I believe, today. He'll be speaking at our dinner. We have members of Congress speaking to the New England Council. We have members of the United States Senate speaking to the New England Council. We have people from FERC and administration all speaking to the New England Council, and staff has just done an extraordinary job, to say the least. On May 16th, when we come back from Washington, we have a very special program with the former president of Poland, Lech Walesa, will be speaking to the New England Council. And boy, is that a timely event, to say the least. And then on June 9th, we will hear from the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think I just read recently, the most popular governor in the United States, and that's Governor Charlie Baker will be speaking. But today we're just delighted to welcome back a very good friend of the New England Council, Congressman Joe Courtney. And for purposes of a very formal introduction, I'm going to ask Weezy Nuara to introduce him, and she is representing Dominion. She's representing Kevin Hennessy, and she herself is an extraordinary individual who does great work for Dominion, and we're lucky to have her part of the New England Council as well as the Metro Hartford Alliance. So again, for purposes of introducing a formal introduction, I'm going to ask Weezy. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jim. Thank you to the New England Council, Metro Hartford Alliance for hosting this event. There's really no substitute for in-person events, that's for sure. Dominion Energy is extremely proud to sponsor this morning's Capitol Hill Report with United States Representative Joe Courtney. I've met several members of his incredible staff, but it's actually my first time meeting the congressman, so I'm honored to be the one introducing him this morning. Congressman Joe Courtney was first elected in 2006 to represent the 2nd Congressional District of Connecticut in the United States House of Representatives. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and House Education and Labor Committee. He is a leader down in Washington and a leader for the state of Connecticut, keeping the interests of his country and of his district front and center in all he does on Capitol Hill. Two key examples come to mind immediately. As a longtime member of the Armed Services Committee, Congressman Courtney has worked to strengthen our nation's defense by leading the call for increased submarine production. As many of you recall, when Joe Courtney arrived in Congress, Electric Boat was facing significant workforce reductions, and for the first time in 50 years, was not actively designing the next generation of submarine. Because of funding secured by Congressman Courtney, through his committee work, Electric Boat has been building 2 submarines per year since 2011 and has expanded into the former Pfizer building in New London to accommodate its growing workforce. Congressman Courtney is also an active member of the House Spent Nuclear Fuel Solutions Caucus, and with Millstone Nuclear Power Station and the decommissioned Connecticut Yankee Power Station in his district, he has long advocated for action at the federal level on spent nuclear fuel. In 2018, Congressman Courtney helped pass bipartisan legislation that for the first time authorized a consolidated interim storage program that would allow spent nuclear fuel stored at individual nuclear power station sites to be moved safely and securely to interim locations before a permanent repository is completed. With Congressman Courtney's leadership and help, $20 million was appropriated to establish a consent-based process to develop interim storage solutions for spent nuclear fuel in the fiscal year 2021 budget. And just recently, the United States Department of Energy solicited feedback from industry stakeholders, municipalities, and others on how to launch such a process. I'm grateful for his leadership and for his support of both industry and, more importantly, the municipalities hosting these critical facilities. He's truly working to find solutions, working to find a path forward, no matter the challenge. So with that, it is my great honor to introduce this morning's special guest speaker, Congressman Joe Courtney.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to the council and Wheezy for your really kind words, and I appreciate the opportunity to spotlight for a few minutes this morning, an issue that actually is incredibly important to the state of Connecticut, which is that we're one of the 104 states that has spent nuclear fuel that was never intended to stay where the nuclear power plants were operating, and it's one of the toughest issues in terms of trying to unlock that. But I'll talk for a few minutes again about the fact that there really seems to be signs of intelligent life in Washington in terms of trying to restart this process. David, again, great work by the Metro Alliance. I think when they write the annals of COVID, the role that chambers of commerce played in terms of really helping stand up the PPP program, the shuttered venues program, the restaurant revitalization funds, getting the word out about employee retention tax credits. This stuff was literally it was like the old saying, you were building it while the plane was flying in terms of trying to get the help out, because it was such a shocking crisis for the economy of this country. And SBA did a pretty good job. I think members tried to get the word out, but the chambers were really an essential connector for businesses who were trying to understand something that was just absolutely brand new. And we didn't retain every single business out there, but we I think really showed an impressive track record. And Connecticut really, I think, overperformed in terms of really getting that critical help out. So thank you for Metro Alliance and all your colleagues with the other chambers around the state. And Jim, who, again, I think has been really, preaching to the region and to our delegation in Washington about the fact that, Washington, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. If you can't build coalitions to pass legislation like the one Wheezy just described, I mean, basically you're just kind of sitting on a bar stool spouting off opinions. And that's not the point of what we're down there for. It's not a debate club. It's about getting results. And the New England Council really, I think, does a great job of connecting, overlapping issues that know no boundaries in terms of state borders, and getting the delegations to work together. So, for example, the spent nuclear fuel process, which Wheezy talked about, yes, it does affect Eastern Connecticut. We have the old Yankee plant, which has been decommissioned, and I was out there a couple weeks ago visiting the casks of spent fuel, which are just sitting there, stacked up with heavy security, heavily armed security, and it has to be. I mean, there's a danger factor in terms of that material that has to be guarded every single day. The ratepayers are paying for that every single day. And the same is true at Waterford, where, again, they are still storing the spent fuel rods down there. But it's not just in Connecticut. It's in Massachusetts at the old Pilgrim facility. It's up in Vermont at Vermont Yankee. And, it totally paralyzes the regions where these things are located because you just can't develop. The Haddam Neck property, by the way, is one of the most spectacular sites in Connecticut in terms of, open space, recreational use. And it's a crying shame that it's just totally off limits because of the fact that we've got, this highly dangerous material sitting there. So, one thing, again, doesn't get much play is that the Department of Energy under Secretary Granholm has initiated this new consent-based process. We've got an outstanding person on standby waiting for the Senate to confirm her nomination, Dr. Catherine Huff, who has spent some time up at MIT. She's a nuclear physicist. She met with our caucus about a month or so ago. She is a total rock star in terms of understanding this process, which is not just pie in the sky. The country of Finland just opened their nuclear waste site that was developed through a consent-based process. Again, that's a country which nuclear power generation is a strong part of their portfolio. Same with Sweden. These are democracies where, again, people had every right to protest and oppose, but they were able to work through with a different type of approach than what was done with Yucca Mountain back in the 1980s, where it was done basically with no consent, and that's really been sort of the roadblock in terms of trying to get that material out there and why it's still stuck in these facilities. So hopefully Dr. Huff's confirmation will happen soon. She came out of committee unanimous, bipartisan vote. But I give up trying to figure out the schedule in the House of Lords. Is this being taped? I'm not sure. But really, we hope to get Dr. Huff down here and frankly around New England, because it's really, when you think about it, it really is an economic development issue in terms of getting this material out. And not just sort of a backyard issue for some of these communities. And again, Dominion is actively participating in this new consent-based process. The town of Waterford participated in it, and we're trying to get the word out. The Hartford Courant, by the way, did a very thoughtful, well-written piece on Sunday that Ed Mahoney, is one of the real few reporters who's been around for a while, and that institutional memory was really put into full use with that article. I would encourage people to take a look at that online because it really sort of walks through the history of this and what it means for Connecticut. So I know we want to have some time for questions. There's a few things going on these days. If you happen to go online this morning with the news, and I'm happy to talk about that. I would like to, again, just spend a second on just sort of the economic picture that's being driven through my subcommittee. I chair the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee of House Armed Services. As Weezy correctly said, when I first got elected, that place was really limping in terms of work that was coming through from the Navy. It was one per year Virginia-class subs that was split. So it was really only a half a sub that was getting built down there. We split it with Virginia down at Newport News, Huntington Ingalls Shipyard. Today, again, the 2 per year build rate for Virginia, but we also have the new class of submarines, Columbia, which is replacing the old Ohio-class ballistic subs. And that's frankly where, if you want to really look at why there's billboards on I-91 looking for people to hire, or if you turn on the TV set these days, you will see those ads. The Columbia-class submarine is 2.5 times the size of Virginia. These things are just behemoths. And if you drive through Groton these days, you will see there's a new structure that has actually gone up over the last year and a half. It's an $800 million building, which is where final assembly of the Columbia-class program is going to take place. I describe it, it's like an NFL football stadium got dropped down onto the banks of the Thames River, because what they're going to be doing is the modular units are going to be built initially in Rhode Island at the Quonset Point facility and down at Newport News, and then they're going to barge up to Groton where the final assembly is going to take place. So the workforce today in terms of both Groton and Quonset Point is 18,000. Again, it was about 6 or 7 when I first came to town. in Washington. It's going to have to grow to 24,000. And that's where the rub is right now in terms of, why those billboards are up, is that, today, if you went on the website, you'd probably find about 600 job openings this morning of a whole variety, whether it's metal trades, whether it's some design work, whether it's even administrative employment that's there. And like every other employer out there, they're struggling in terms of trying to find people to fill those positions. And as I said, this is going to be a persistent problem because not only do they have to grow, they also have to deal with attrition. There's a segment of the workforce that's just hitting the exits, and COVID, frankly, accelerated that process. And we see it in other sectors, whether it's healthcare with nurses. My wife's a nurse practitioner at Children's Hospital, and, she sees it with, her colleagues who work in other, hospitals and nursing homes and other settings. It's happening in IT, it's happening in teaching. And, there's a lot, obviously that people are really upset about in terms of the economy with gas prices. Diesel is insane. It's over $5 a gallon right now. And obviously other components of, goods like food and rent is really a big problem there. But I think in terms of, and there's ways that, the president's trying to work on it, and hopefully we can help with that. And again, happy to talk some more about it. But the workforce issue in this country, I think, is a fundamental structural problem that we have to address. The New York Times the other day reported that for every one unemployed person in America today, one unemployed person, there is 1.8 job openings in the U.S. economy. And, there's limits to how you can catch up to that, because one of the barriers in terms of people taking, getting that opportunity to really elevate themselves is the skills gap that's out there. And whether it's in IT for insurance companies, whether it's, different jobs down at Dominion, whether it's in Connecticut or Virginia, obviously, EB, healthcare, we need to come up with ways to, in a relatively rapid fashion, try and create those skills so that people can keep the lights on in this country. One of the ways that I think we can do that, and I sit on the Education and Labor Committee, is that there was a federal job training program, which is not always that well understood. It's called the Workforce Investment Act. It was created under Bill Clinton. It basically is an employer-driven process in terms of how you create skills to fill regional and local workforce gaps that are out there. And again, down at EB, they saw the bow wave of this work coming 6 or 7 years ago. Tom Perez was Secretary of Labor and came up and gave us an initial grant to kick off using the Workforce Investment Act structure to create a curriculum that was flash bang. It was 10 weeks for a welder, 8 weeks for some of the other metal trades that are down there, 8 weeks for designers. And frankly, I love community colleges, but even a 2-year program is a challenge right now in terms of where the economy is right now. We need to have, a more surgical, rapid way to get people those skills. The Education and Labor Committee reported out the update, the reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act earlier in April, which basically quintuples the amount of funding that would flow to state departments of labor, because that's where it goes. It goes from the U.S. Department of Labor to state departments of labor, and then it's like deployed to different workforce boards. Connecticut has 5. The Capital Region Workforce Board is for the Hartford area, EWIB is for Eastern Connecticut, and so on with the rest of the states there. And we know this model that was developed down at EWIB, the 8 to 10 week model, pre-apprenticeship, it works. There's just no question that the minute anyone gets a certificate who comes through that program and they just hit number 2,000 in terms of their graduates, they are hired like that. And we're not talking, minimum wage here in terms of, the wages and benefits that go with it. Their problem down there is just they need more slots. They need more funding to have more slots so that they can create more of those critical skills that are down there. But again, it's not limited to manufacturing. You can extend that to, again, other sectors like healthcare, like, financial services. Again, the list goes on and on. We've got a great team in Washington that is led by New England with Marty Walsh at the Department of Labor. We got Gina Raimondo at the Department of Commerce, and we got Miguel Cardona, who actually came down. I took him down to Groton to walk him through the welding program that's down there. By the way, he is a graduate of Tech High School. I mean, I just love that we have a Secretary of Education who went to Tech High School and is about as down to earth. And I mean, he was like, his interaction with the kids in the welding booths was just, it was so much fun to watch him. He's a really special guy. But Marty, when he came down to visit the construction facility that I was telling you about, he was, it was hilarious with him and the other building trades guys that were down there. And Gina, again, she gets it in terms of all this. Again, I hope that the business community is going to really step up here and speak out about the fact we got to get this bill done. The last time we passed it, President Obama signed it. It was a bipartisan love fest in the Eisenhower building when it was signed into law. But frankly, that bill, it's out of date. We need to update it, and we need to really enhance the capacity that these programs need. And frankly, I've been home this week. It's just everywhere I go. The number one issue is I can't find people. I was at a police department yesterday, and they used rescue plan money for filling some police positions out there. Normally they would have had, it's a small town, they'd have dozens of applications if they posted. It's crickets that are out there. And this is going to really, I think, be a drag on our recovery if we don't really get serious about dealing with workforce in a way that we know works. That's my rant this morning, and I do hope that the chambers will take it to heart, and our office can give, and Chahana's on the committee as well. We have all the particulars on it, and we know it's not going to come out unscathed in terms of the way we marked it up necessarily in the House, but we got to move this, because it's something that is so critical to companies that are recovering from this COVID recession, but who have lost a lot of their older workers to try and refill and replenish the ranks. So I'll stop there, and again, happy to open it up for some questions. Yeah.
Maybe I could follow up on that.
Yep, sure.
Waste caucus. Is there any timeline that a recommendation would be made? Say, we just talked about New Mexico,
Yep,
Texas,
right.
But is there any agenda to say, look, by X amount of days, you're going to have some recommendations?
Yeah, so what's refreshing about DOE, Department of Energy, is that, again, they put out the RFI, the request for information for all across the country for people to come in and sort of raise their hand if they really were interested in exploring it. It will result in real economic development. There's jobs and so there's parts of the country whose geology is very stable, where that actually is something that they want to get back to us on. So Dr. Huff, and I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was about 200 requests came in that were interested in terms of, and they are going to be, so that was, the RFA was open till early March. And now they are going to be publishing, and they have a website. They want to be transparent about this. They don't want this to be something that just is a big zero. So again, the FY21 budget, as Weezy said, had $20 million in it. The new budget that President Biden just signed doubled down on it. So, they are putting real money into this process. And to me, talk is cheap. When budgets are there, then this thing is actually, serious. And certainly our office, if people have, want to find out more about that, or, what are going to be the benchmark dates in terms of when they're going to go public with the feedback that's coming in, we are very excited about having an opportunity, and we'll push it out.
And then the president has, announced a $33 billion appropriation for Ukraine, but he wants it to be part of the COVID
Right.
funding. Speaker wants that way. There were some people saying, no, we want to split it and vote independent.
Right.
Your thoughts on how that's going to work out?
So I think that, the decision was made tactically to let the Senate go first, just because that's been obviously more of a bottleneck in terms of moving bills. And exactly, he said it. So this morning, basically the news was that they are expecting to take it up by next week. The Senate is in session. Again, even for them to move forward on a, motion to open debate, and I mean, there's like 4 or 5 steps, which is exasperating. But nonetheless, I mean, Schumer said next week they are planning on getting the bill to us in the House. And I Nancy, who just came back from Kyiv, I'm sure is going to be, on standby. Whether or not the COVID money stays in or not, it should. We were just talking about, we're not out of the woods yet, in terms of, this pandemic. There were 3 House members that were tested positive in Washington last week who at least went public with it. I think there's probably more. And that needs to be replenished. But whether or not they can convince both sides to come up with a plan still remains to be seen. But so the $33 million includes $20 billion for more military assistance. I think a lot of us are following this obviously like a box score every day. The initial wave of military assistance was defensive equipment, the shoulder and handheld, which the Ukrainian military used to unbelievable success in terms of pushing the Russian army, which no one expected out of Kyiv. And but now it's more heavy offensive assistance with artillery, armored forces, a lot more sort of firepower, because at this point, this is going to be pretty rough, in the eastern part of the country there, but they need more firepower. And I think at this point now, whatever hesitation countries had at the initial phases about giving that kind of equipment, because there was concern it would end up in Russian hands, that's gone now. And I just would note, the other part of my subcommittee is sea power and projection forces. Projection forces is actually airlift and sea lift. I mean, those are the logistics guys. And, the old saying, strategy is for amateurs, logistics is for professionals. General Van Ovost, who's a 4-star General Air Force kick-ass pilot, she's amazing. She's the one in charge of that whole logistics operation. Again, they can't talk about it too much publicly, but they have moved 200,000 tons of equipment, and that was just in the first 2 months. And they fly into where Nancy and Biden and others, Kevin McCarthy, were, Rzeszów, Poland, in the eastern part of the country there, and then it's unloaded onto ground transport into Ukraine, and it is around the clock, and it's just they're just doing great stuff in terms of getting that material over there, I think it's just a part of the military that always gets sort of under recognized as the logistics guys who they're the ones that turn all the stuff we say in Washington and even with the military leadership into real world delivery. Sure. So, our phones are blowing up all the time, asking, from local communities. And so there, as there was different buckets that were part of the $1.2 trillion bill, which is real and which was pretty much paid for. So it was not like the COVID bills. So there were parts of the bill that moved very fast. I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers, another under-recognized part of the military. In Connecticut, immediately announced a series of projects that had been on the shelf, and they do infrastructure. So, for example, I was down in Westbrook the other day. They're going to get dredging money for the Patchogue River, which gets piled up with silt and just cripples, the whole sort of marinas down there. And we had the First Selectmen and all the local businesses there. I mean, they were doing backflips because normally dredging money just always gets pushed to the bottom of the pile, and that's going to now unlock the Patchogue River. And frankly, we have other to-do items there. Any of you who saw the Mayflower was launched up in Mystic, and it ran smack dab into a sandbar, right in the Mystic River, and they had to wait for high tide to move it out of there. And we get the silt on this side of Long Island Sound. So anyway, Up in Thompson, Connecticut, way up in the quiet corner, they just got money for new infrastructure for, again, a dam that the Army Corps operates, and there's also an open space, walking area there. It's gorgeous up there. The bridge has been basically collapsed in a river for 10 years, and that's finally going to get fixed like with that. So there's, some of those small but really meaningful changes that are in there. The big projects, bridges, roads, all that goes to state DOT. Joe Giletti has the STIP list, the Surface Transportation Infrastructure Priority. So Gold Star Bridge, which is the largest passenger bridge in Connecticut and was built in 1946 or 43. It was in World War II, actually. Again, the northbound lane, I'm not telling you anything, just, be careful when you drive over. Because, and frankly, that's well understood. That's going to get now, the money it needs to fix the deck, that is really way overdue down there. The swing bridge in East Haddam, which that area well, Danny, again, 120-year-old bridge. It breaks down, boat traffic, it's a mess. That's going to finally get fixed. Old Saybrook Bridge, which is the rail bridge there, another 100-plus, Amtrak has already said that's, now going to get rebuilt. But, I mean, these things, I wish it was, quicker, because sometimes people get very kind of, skeptical about whether or not it really is going to change anything, but it's going to change a lot. And the EV chargers, we really want to start seeing those babies, it's popping up around the state, because, that's a really good way to boost electric vehicle sales, as if gas prices weren't enough, right now. And, water, sewer, all that water infrastructure, again. So Governor Lamont, because a lot of this comes through state agencies, has designated Dan Boughton, right? Boughton, Mark Boughton, sorry. I think it was his father. Anyway, he's sort of been put in charge of, kind of being the czar. And he's a really serious guy, smart guy. It's a lot. And I think there's going to be a lot of external pressure to get this stuff sort of flowing out there for a lot of reasons. And but that's where most of it is still going to come through the different state agencies that have jurisdiction over different types of infrastructure. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Right. I wish they were better. We did pass the overall comprehensive one that would have not just applied towards Medicare patients, but also people with private health insurance in terms of, again, what I think, looking at the international price benchmark that was being used still would have put the U.S. above a lot of other countries, but would have definitely helped the finances of Medicare and also people on private health insurance. It's stalled out in the Senate, and like I said, it's hard to sort of figure out what works over there. So Plan B was we actually did one just for insulin, okay, which again is the poster child of just how ridiculous the price structure is in this country. And actually, we got a better vote in the House. That was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And again, it's just totally zeroed in on that one medication, which again has been off patent for about 100 years. And there's just no, all those arguments against this, just totally fall apart when you talk about insulin. And it's so cheap, in Europe and Canada, and it's so expensive here. So we're hoping that, and again, it's paid for, hoping that, somehow that one item at least we can shake things loose in the Senate. And we'll see. Yeah. 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 Well, thank you. I mean, that was a nice sort of description of, I personally feel that when COVID first struck, the shared experience that, again, cut across geographic party lines, shattered a lot of the polarization in Washington. And if you really look at it, the succession of COVID bills that passed, starting with the CARES Act, and there were 2 or 3 follow-on bills, as I know Children's Hospital was following very closely, really were quite, unanimous or close to unanimous. I mean, which sort of defied all the conventional wisdom in Washington. When the American Rescue Plan was passed just over a year ago, unfortunately, that consensus really broke down. And, there were a lot of people who were like, COVID's over, we don't need to do this. Why do the states and local communities, need rescue plan money? That's a bailout, for pensions and all that kind of stuff. So, it was all sort of creeping back in terms of that polarization. And it was a very divided vote at the end of the day. I think, history will, confirm that passing the rescue plan was necessary, if nothing else, because of the, the need to develop follow-on vaccines and booster shots, which would have, I think, sputtered if we had not had what was in the rescue plan. But as Jim said, we're trying to get really a relatively modest allotment for COVID as part of this package that hopefully will come together. And again, it's really, I personally feel we need to do more in terms of getting international assistance out there for vaccinations. I mean, the fact that there's countries with really terrible vaccination rates, that's a threat to everybody, that's out there. And they're usually very poor countries who, couldn't possibly pay for it. So that's not a very uplifting sort of, description of it. But to me, the COVID specific votes, that's where, what we hoped would be hopefully a breakthrough in terms of the polarization has really, faltered. And so we are pretty much back into, but one other encouraging note, though, I would say is that when we passed the FY22 budget just recently that Biden signed, the driving force why that finally came together, because Rosa had been running around with her hair on fire legitimately about the fact that we cannot do a year-long continuing resolution, was the invasion of Ukraine. And the fact that we had a need to have that supplemental piece for Ukraine, that actually changed the dynamic down there. And we had actually a pretty respectable bipartisan vote in terms of getting that package through. All the conventional wisdom that some of the press in Washington and even, the Times and the Post and Fox News and everything like that, it can get shattered overnight with external events. And by the way, one of them happened last night, obviously with the Alito decision being released. So, that's where I think, again, our job is to really, when these events happen, is just to really try and, use them in a creative, positive way to get changes. And I do think that we're going to get that help to Ukraine. They need it, and and frankly, there are outliers in both parties. Frankly, more on the Republican side. I mean, if you look at, we passed a resolution to support NATO, which last term, last administration passed almost unanimously. It was almost verbatim the same language. There were 63 no votes in the House. I mean, it's just like, what? If you ever had the proof of why alliances are important, but anyway, it's, that's my take. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, again, I'm on the committee, so and I've been certainly talking to Secretary Cardona and some folks in the White House that are there. And Jim and I were just talking about that. I actually thought Biden's position when he ran for president, which was $10,000 of loan forgiveness, I think had merit for a lot of reasons. Number one, I think going much bigger would really create a lot more backlash from people who are asking, why am I, canceling or, watching debt get canceled when my kid never went to college or I never went to college. I mean, that's out there. And it's not totally, unfounded in my personal opinion. The other reason, though, frankly, is that 10,000 cohort of loans there, they are the lowest performing cohort. It may seem counterintuitive, but that's where the highest number of defaults are. And if you were a bank and you were trying to just organize your portfolio, at some point you cut loose underperforming debt. And that's what, it's really amazing, the statistic. It's like over 80% of the defaults are concentrated in that population. And so, why are we killing ourselves with, loan servicers and all that, to chase debt, which we're probably never going to ever see? So that sort of makes sense to me. My frustration is that as somebody who came in and we passed the College Cost Reduction Act that cut interest rates, that is still, in my opinion, the overhang that still needs work. If we allow the student loans to kick back in and snap back, you're going to look at 6, 7, 8% interest rates that are out there, which is obscene. And by the way, that money all just goes into the federal treasury. This is not ever, Stafford Student Loan Program was not set up to be a revenue generator. So I've introduced a bill to actually just create a 0% interest rate. It doesn't, do anything on principal balance. It just says, this is a way that you can, I think, help not just the people who have existing debt, but also, kids in high school who are going to be going to college, and also helping, parents with Parent Plus loans to basically refinance down to 0%. And we're working with Senator Bennett in Colorado to actually roll something out. We have a proposal that actually pays for it. It's deficit neutral. And I was at E.O. Smith High School in Mansfield the other day, and one of the kids asked about, debt cancellation. I said, I just said pretty much what I just said here. And I said, but just remember, if that happens, not one kid in this room benefits. This is about legacy debt and existing debt. It's not about kids who are, juniors in high school who are applying for college. It does not reform or change the system. And that's where I think interest rate refinancing and bringing that down, that would help them in terms of, having the interest rate capitalization, which is like a cancer, with people who have student loans out there. It ends up where the interest is a bigger number than the principal balance. That is outrageous. So that's my take on it. We'll see what the president does. It's, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, again, you want to talk about a way of reducing debt. Doubling Pell and it's an equitable way of doing it, because it's not a program that goes to high income families that are there. So absolutely, and I think frankly we can be creative with Pell a little bit in terms of, extending it to some certificate programs that are out there that colleges and higher education institutions could participate in. But I do think that when we talk about WIO, again. The nice thing about it, it's not the way the programs are designed. It's not done in Washington. It's done with the local workforce boards, and there's a way for stakeholders like higher ed to participate in that process, and should. I would also just say that one thing that I see certainly down at EB is that someone who gets hired into the workforce there, it's not a static state of affairs. They really encourage people to pursue engineering degrees or further, higher ed. So I don't see it as a, either or situation for higher ed. Yeah.
Can I just ask the last question? Both the House and Senate have their own version of the compete bill,
Right.
and that's a very important bill. The New England Council's been advocating the bill for a long time because of the presence in supply chain.
Yep.
Microchips being produced here in the United States. Big piece of legislation. Your thoughts on whether the parties are going to come together and get a meaningful bill on the president's desk?
I'm actually pretty optimistic on that one because again, that's another one where the external factor is so strong, and obviously dealing with their competition with China that has a bipartisan power to it. I think the House was very ambitious with our version of it, but I think we have a speaker who is a very pragmatic person and understands that the conferencing process, which will probably taper the bill to a smaller size, just like it happened with the infrastructure bill, is you don't let opportunities pass. Like I said, it's not a debate club. We're there to get a result.
Well, we want to thank the Congressman. I was talking to somebody earlier, and a young lady said, Joe Courtney is almost too nice to be in politics. Well, you don't hear that too often. What a wonderful compliment. He's almost too nice to be in politics. So, what a wonderful reputation to have. But as you could tell, as somebody who watches all of the members of the delegation from New England, Joe Courtney is universally respected, and not only just in the New England delegation, but many Republicans just admire him, a man of integrity, and a person who wants to find consensus, and not into sound bites, not into Twitter and just making a statement, but really trying to find common ground. And we need more Joe Courtney. What a wonderful reputation.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. That was very nice. I appreciate it.